What's going on? Today I'm going to teach you how I created this motion that you see on screen. If you want to see the full-length video where I do the Photoshop breakdown, how I prepared the PSD file, how I exported it, and even some effects that are blurred out in this video, head over to my website and check out the crash course that I posted on this. The crash course shows some of the effects that were cut out in this video, along with my export settings and the whole Photoshop preparation process. So here I'm opening up the PSD file that I prepared for this motion artwork specifically. Now I'm going to take the parent and link whip tool and I'm going to parent certain layers to others. For example, I'm parenting the hair to the body, and then I'm going to parent the body to the person base, then the front boot to the front leg, and then the front leg to the person base. After I do that, I'm going to color code my layers. The person's going to be red, text's going to be green, and the lens flare is going to be yellow, so I'm organized. After I got all organized, I brought in this cheetah print stock video and I started placing it in place of where the cheetah print on the cover was. And I had this in mind while making the cover because I knew I was going to want the cheetah print to be moving. So here you're going to see me drag it in, transform it, and put it in place. Now that the cheetah print's in place, I'm going to bring a black and white filter and put it over one of them. I'm going to edit the values until it looks how I want it to look, and now I'm going to copy and paste it onto the others. I'm then going to switch the blending mode to soft light, and now I'm going to edit the opacity so it looks how it looked on the cover. And then I'm going to proceed to time stretch each of the clips until they're all at 15 seconds. I'm now going to duplicate each one of the cheetah prints and drag them a little bit under 15 seconds. That way I can fade them into each other since this stock video clip isn't loopable. Now that the cheetah print duplicates are in place, I'm going to add opacity keyframes to the beginning of the duplicates. I'm then going to go to 15 seconds and add another keyframe that has them at the max capacity I want them. Go back to the beginning keyframes and set them to 0. Now I'm going to select the original cheetah print and add keyframes at the same place I put the starting keyframes for the duplicate. I'm then going to keyframe it again at the end and set those keyframes to 0. That way, these duplicates and the originals fade into each other very smoothly and it's not a ugly jump cut. Also wanted to mention all these keyframes are going to be easy eased. I do this on about 90% of my keyframes, so throughout this video that's going to be a repeating thing. Now I'm going to add in an adjustment layer and I'm going to rename this amorphous light, and then I'm going to go over to my effects panel and type in mood lighting or amorphous, and I'm going to drag that effect over it. Now I'm going to edit the values of the effect to get it to look how I want. This is a cool little lighting effect that I feel is very effective. Now I'm going to save the project just in case if it crashes or anything goes wrong. I have a saved version and can go back to it. Now I'm moving on to the part where I actually animate the body, moving the anchor points using the move tool, as you can see at the top, to where I want them to rotate from. Now I'm starting with my front boot layer, adding a rotation keyframe and then going to 2 seconds and adding another keyframe where the boot actually moves a little bit. Now you can see here that I can't move it fully due to how I prepared the motion, but I'm going to get it to a spot that looks good enough. Now that I got it where I wanted, I'm going to jump to 4 seconds and I'm going to move it in the opposite direction until I got it where I want it. From here, I'm going to highlight and then duplicate these keyframes until I get to about 28 seconds. Now that I got the last keyframes placed, I'm going to highlight the first keyframe and place it as the last, highlight them all, and then set them to easy ease. Moving on to the hip/thigh, I'm going to place the rotation keyframe, jump to 2 seconds once again, edit the value to get it to where I want it, jump to 4 seconds, and then I'm going to edit the value in the opposite direction. Once that's how I want it, I'm going to copy the keyframes and duplicate them once again until they hit 28 seconds. Once they're at 28 seconds, I'm going to highlight the first keyframe, paste it to the last keyframe, select them all, and easy ease them. Now right here, I switch back over to Photoshop. This part of the video is part of my crash course, which can be purchased on my website that you can see on screen. Sadly, it's cut out of this video just because the crash course gives out a lot more sauce and in-depth detail of how I really create everything step by step. So if you want to check that out, go over to my website. Now I moved on to making the actual body move. I placed a rotation keyframe at 0 and one at 2. I then took the back arm and parented it to the body. So when I made the rotation actually move, the back arm moved with it. After that, just like the other body parts keyframes, I put one at 4 and moved the value of the body in the opposite direction. I then copied these keyframes and pasted them until it went to 28. Once they got to 28, I copied the first keyframe and pasted it to the last and easy eased them. Moving on to my hair layer, I went over to the effects panel and typed in wave warp and dragged that over to the hair. I then started editing the values to get the hair to move in a wavy direction of how I wanted it. I then set the phasing to the top edge, so it's basically like an anchor point, and only anything below the top edge will have the effect. Here I wanted to make the person move forward and back, so in order to do so, I turned all the person layers into 3D objects. After I turned them all into 3D objects, I set a position keyframe on my person base layer at 0 and one at 2 seconds. I then moved the person forward and then set a keyframe at 4 seconds. When it was at 4 seconds, I then moved the person backwards, copied these keyframes, and repeated them till 28 seconds. Once we got to 28 seconds, I copied the first keyframe to the last keyframe and easy eased them. Once I got done that, I went back and edited some of the person's movement by changing out some of the keyframes. Right here on screen, you'll see me doing it for the boot. I did it for some other parts of the body, but it wasn't really that important to keep in the tutorial because it's basically the same thing as what I already showed. I then decided to move on to the text. I got a diamond stock video and I moved it over the letters. I then added a motion tile effect over it so I could expand the size of the video. And this basically just mirrors it. I then took out my pen tool so I could mask out the shape of each letter. This way that diamond stock video that I got will only affect the diamond parts of the letters. After I had it masked out, I then changed the blending mode of the diamond stock video to overlay. I then lowered the opacity of it to 40 so it wasn't as strong, and I proceeded to do this for the rest of the letters. Now I duplicated the diamond effect video, scaled it up, and track mapped it to the border. So now the border has the same diamond effect. I then proceeded to duplicate the diamond video repeatedly and mask out every single letter in the title to make it all have the same diamond effect. After the diamond effect was completed, I moved on to my lens flares, selected the ones that were over the border, and parented them to the border. I then went through the rest of the lens flares and selected them and parented them to whatever letter they were on top of. Now I wanted to make the lens flare spin, so I selected all of them, added a rotation keyframe at the beginning, added a rotation keyframe at the end that spun about 5 times. Once they were done spinning, I added a blinking opacity effect, and I did this for every single lens flares, changing the values on each and every single one of them. So all the lens flares would flash at randomly different times, just like lens flares do. I then moved on to camera movement. I went to layer new camera and then layer new null object. I then parented the camera to the null object so the null object controls the camera. Turned every layer into a 3D layer. I then selected my person layer and started adding in position keyframes, scale keyframes, rotation keyframes, and then I went over to 2 seconds, added in the same keyframes, went back to 0 seconds, and brought the person closer to the camera using the position. I then went up to the null object and started changing the position of that too to zoom even closer in on the person. I then moved it around to about the top left of her head and zoomed all the way in at the background. I then added in all my keyframes, went over to 2 seconds, and reset all the keyframes back to how they originally were. So I now have the zoom out effect on the cover. Once the zoom out effect was completed, I wanted to make the text come in. I went to my first text layer and set a keyframe at 0 and set the value of the scale to 1. Set another keyframe at 130 and another keyframe at 2. The keyframe at 2, I set the scale to 100. I then easy eased these keyframes. Once these keyframes were done, I wanted to make it look like the text was bouncing. So I set a keyframe around 225 and set the value of the scale to around 105. Then added another keyframe around 245 with the value of 100. I then repeated this process for the rest of the diamond text, having the same zoom in bounce effects that I just demonstrated. After the main text was completed, I wanted to make the artist's name right in since it was cursive. This was another part of the video that I cut out. If you want to see it and learn how to make this effect, go over to my website and check out the crash course. I then wanted to make the diamond text rotate and make it bigger and smaller. Set a keyframe at 4 seconds with the Z rotation having a +2 value and the scale having 104. Then another keyframe at 6 for the Z rotation having a value of -4 and a scale value of 93. I then copied these keyframes and duplicated them all the way until roughly 20 seconds. From here, I then copied my beginning zoom in keyframes. Then I pasted them at the end and time reversed them. So basically, when the cover zoomed out at the end, the text would also fade out. So it could be a looping motion. After that was done, I went back and deleted some of the keyframes in the middle just because it wasn't giving me the look I wanted. I still kept the same base idea, but some of the keyframes were just messed up. So I just took the beginning keyframes I put and reduplicated them to make sure I got them in the right sequence. After that, I just repeated this same process for the rest of the diamond text. I now needed the camera movement to also have a seamless look, so I copied the beginning keyframes and pasted them around 28 seconds and time reversed them. I then repeated the same process for the person zoom in effect. I took the beginning keyframes, copied them, pasted them at the end, and time reversed them. Now it was time to add in one of my favorite effects, which is a camera shake. You guys know the drill by now. If you want to see how to do this effect, head over to the website on screen. It will be linked in the description as well. Now that the camera shake was added, I needed to extend the background. So I added a motion tile effect, mirrored the edges, and set the output width and height. I then wanted to add a blur effect, so I added in a adjustment layer, went to the effects, typed in Gaussian blur, put that on the adjustment layer, and set my blur to around 25. I then set a keyframe at the beginning of the motion, and then one at 1 second, where I've set the Gaussian blurriness to 0. So the beginning of the motion had a blur, and then it fades out, and then at the end I duplicated the keyframes, pasted them, and time reversed them, so it has that seamless loop. Now I wanted to add in some particles, so I brought in my particle stock video, and I set the blending mode to screen. I then wanted to time stretch it so it was only 15 seconds long. Then right-clicked it in my project panel, went to interpret footage and set the loop to 3. I then dragged it for the duration of the motion. I then went back to my null layer and I wanted to make the cover also spin when it zoomed out. So I started to set the rotation on 0 to 50 and then the rotation at 30 seconds I set to -50 and dragged the 0 keyframes out a little bit. So when the cover zoomed out, you could see the actual rotation for a little bit. Lastly, I wanted the cover to zoom in and out throughout the whole motion. So I set a keyframe at 4 and I put the value of the scale to 97-ish. And then I set another keyframe at 6 seconds and set the scale to around 103. I then copied these keyframes and pasted them so they would repeat all the way up till 26 seconds. This is the end of the tutorial for here on YouTube. If you guys want to see the export settings I used and how I exported this exactly, it's linked down in the description below. You guys know where to go. I hope to be making more of these tutorials soon, so please like, comment, subscribe, and share, and I'll see you guys next time.